and I've realized I've had this experience with a few films where my impression of them was very much informed by the people I remember like really loving them, right? So like I had to like finally go back and like watch Borat or something because my only recollection of that film was the people who liked it who like really didn't get the point, you know? And so like and Dark Knight has a little bit of that for me as well because I remember my high school football coach who was like, not in the room for the movie at all, um, like coming in almost as if on cue for Joker to do his trick with the pencil, laughing hysterically, talking about how much he loved it, and then leaving the wrestling room where we were watching this and everything. And I just that, for some reason that's like burned into my head because I was like a 14-year-old. This
Yeah.
this is a deeply distressing act of violence to me.
Went through the man's eye, probably, and
Right. Right. Well, if
into his
you're
brain.
if you're somebody who like literally, encourages adolescents to run their heads into each other, one season a year, I suspect that that type of thing really doesn't register that much for you. But
No.
what about you? What do you have in the ambient energy of 2008, 2009?
That came out at a time period when I was like obsessed with DC and Marvel shit, basically. Because I think like the first Iron Man movie came out too around the same time, which is also a whole other topic in and of itself. An arms dealer, you know, taking on that
Yeah.
role basically in
Who
that film.
shoots
But
and cries?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so I think it's weird looking at all of those films now compared to how I view them, at this point in my life. I mean, it's just
Sure.
it's a complete 180. Now, not that's not to say that I still don't enjoy to watch these films. Like when Robert Pattinson's Batman movie comes out next year, I'm going to be in theater seeing that 100%. Um, you know, for the experience of watching at its most superficial level a good film. Um,
Right.
100% I'm gonna be doing that. But uh like it's I think for a lot of people on the left who are watching these films now and who grew up watching these films, there's far more conscious realization of like what's like the roots, the origins of these movies and stuff like that, and um the themes that we're going to kind of address in this film. You're more conscious of.
Like this is a really dark movie, right?
Oh
Like
yeah,
not just
yeah,
aesthetically, but but thematically, of course, right?
yeah.
And I think that what this movie manages to capture is the sort of vanquished but still heroic ideology of the post 9/11, post-war, or yeah, post-war on terror landscape, right?
Hmm.
That we had kind of made our peace with, a being a complex good in the world,
Yeah.
right?
I think
Um,
that's even more evident in The Dark Knight Rises with Bane,
right,
who,
right,
yeah, I mean, that could be something that we can address later on in another
sure.
episode. But like, I mean, yeah, the Joker does his thing, but I mean, the timing of like The Dark Knight Rises and what was going on in the world at that point in time and is still going on, like, very, I don't know, it's very relevant, I would say. And
Right. No, and I agree, but I think that with the Joker, what I see is like the not or the less xenophobic description of the enemies of the American state in
yeah,
2008, right?
yeah,
That it's like, okay, so they're, the Joker. is not in a turban. He is not actually from southern Italy wearing makeup. Like he's just a stand-in for chaos, right? For directionless, incomprehensible chaos. The Joker as a villain is meant to give sort of the safest possible description of the enemy, right? In the
Yeah.
war on terror, right? Without reverting to tropes about Islam or
Mhm.
what have you. It's just there are people in the world who want to hurt you and want to, just want to watch the world burn.
Yeah.
And we need something that can break the rules, that can get in the gray spaces between the state
Mhm.
and chaos and mediate,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that this is the last defense of what we'd been doing for 7 years by the time this movie came out. And I kind of see it as a nice sort of place to shift away from what we've been talking about for the last month or so, because we're sort
Mhm.
of now we're looking at kind of the after of
Yeah.
of the state and how it was viewed, through this piece of media. And I remember superheroes being less in vogue with people our age than they certainly are now among younger kids, right?
Yeah.
Like young kids now are unambiguously more interested in, superhero media than they were when we were children. And I
Are
think
they?
that,
Is that
yeah,
you
that's
think
how
so?
I think it's. I mean, part of it is I've been to like, well, and I mean, I guess I didn't. I can't compare my experience in Chile against what it used
I
to be
mean,
like in another place, but I genuinely think that it's that like the one thing yeah, the question for me is whether or not people were any less interested in superheroes when we were kids versus like 20 years ago or 20 years
that's a
later,
that's a
like
question
in the
I'm
late
very curious
80s.
about now that you've
Like I
said it.
think that people
So,
were more interested in superheroes in the like 80s and 90s than they were when like you and I were sort of in like the heart of our
okay.
youth.
So the thing that I would wanna ask is w w in I don't know how we would figure this out, but, like, were and I'm not disagreeing with you because a part of me thinks that you're right. Um, so that makes me wonder, like, were comic books bigger during that period than they were during, like, our particular generation growing up during that time period? So,
Right.
because to me, like, it seems like comic books kind of were super popular. Their popularity faded a little bit, and then it's picked up quite a bit
Right.
now. I mean,
Right.
you look at the reinvention of Star Wars over the past 10 years and how
Mhm.
popular Star Wars comics are now and stuff like that. So I think just using that as an example, I think it's definitely
Right.
picked up, I would say, over the past 10 years in
Mhm.
particular compared to
Right.
when we were growing up and stuff.
And what
Yeah.
I'm kind of driving at here is that there has to kind of be something explicable in the culture, right? To justify or at least contextualize that shift. And I think that that's something that we should kind of play with a little bit, here today, is that there's something I think especially in these Batman movies, right?
Mhm.
Which manage to like very practically kind of bridge the gap between the gritty realism of post 9/11 media and all of this sort of stuff with
Yeah.
that world of superheroes and everything in a way that enabled them to be like absorbed into the streaming character universe world of media today,
Yeah.
right? that
Yeah.
that it, that what you have here is you have a cultural, and a material sort of coming together between, streaming and the sort of sequel character universe world of media, and this sort of alchemy that's done by this film that we're going to be discussing today, The Dark Knight,
Mhm.
that gets us to where we are today.
In this medium, and I may be wrong on this, I haven't seen a lot of analysis, particularly from the left, on this particular film.
And we're not here to further add to the universal adoration from high school boys when they see the Joker do his infamous pencil trick in the beginning of the movie.
right? We are instead wanting to attempt to discuss a deeper theme that the Joker, for example, may or may not represent in this film by Christopher Nolan. And while there is a superficial component that appeals to our baser needs for violent spectacle when it comes to watching Ledger's Joker, I think of the lot of I think a lot of the purpose behind his character goes unnoticed by the casual viewer of this film.
Yeah, Ledger's Joker calls himself an agent of chaos in the film, and it's blatantly obvious at times, even for the casual viewer that we just mentioned, that this Joker is a symbol of anarchy. But like a lot of terms thrown around in the American political vernacular, anarchism's widely misunderstood and at times equated with pure ungovernable chaos.
And that's not to say Ledger's Joker was or wasn't acting as a so-called agent of chaos. We tend to forget the historical nature of this character throughout the DC universe, which is that he's a murdering clown that commits atrocious acts of violence.
And we're not here to defend that violence with our analysis. Instead, we want to look at the underlying theme that pits this Joker against what could be viewed as a microstate, that being Gotham, and its unyielding and devoted defender, Batman.
Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne, a billionaire who inherited an empire of wealth and power from his parents, dresses up as Batman to beat criminals to a pulp in the alleys of Gotham at night. In the case of Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, these criminals are usually individuals that are associated with the Gotham mob.
I noticed this. It's something I almost never would have noticed, and until sort of watching it through this, is that there is kind of this like repartee between Alfred and Batman that's meant to like nod towards like the Anglo-American relationship, right? Where it's like here, Alfred is here like just sort of helping and managing this sort of and Riley remarking on the pitfalls of trying to, be at war with the agents of chaos. And what he's being is this sort of avatar for the British Empire, failed and cynical, giving advice
Yeah.
to Christian Bale, this embodiment of the, American military state, um, in its war on terror context. Every conversation that they have, just kind of has this just this sprinkling of the of the Anglo-American imperial history. And
And Bruce Wayne decides to use, all of his fancy gadgets and gear and in The Dark Knight, mass domestic surveillance to fight crime, all while continuing to be a narcissistic hoarder of wealth.
look, we're not here to completely destroy the character of Bruce Wayne and Batman for you folks, though in real life we probably would be.
Yeah.
uh,
Right. So this film, at its most superficial level, is an amazing crime and heist thriller that just so happens to feature Batman and his
yeah.
arch nemesis. Christopher Nolan, like, there's no denying it, is an amazingly talented filmmaker and cinematographer. There's just no getting around that. But we want to more closely examine, sort of the socio-political themes, as we've already been talking about, that underline and revolve around the film's two central characters that are pitted against each other. And that's sort of what we were just hinting at previously. Our argument in the case of this film is that they represent, the state and authority versus the forces that wish to upend said authority.
Our billionaire protagonist is still an individual that likes to beat the shit out of people who have most likely been driven to crime out of necessity from a lack of opportunity and socioeconomic assistance. And all of this occurs in a completely unbalanced society dominated by oligarchs like Bruce Wayne himself.
I was trying to find a quote I had seen a while ago. I think it was said by Mr. Robert Fuller in a list of uncomfortable plot summaries. His simple description of the Batman films is wealthy man assaults the mentally ill.
But it can't be overstated that these films, this character in particular, within the realm of superheroes, is just a rich guy who is obsessed with dishing out extrajudicial beatings of folks who have turned to crime out of socioeconomic necessity. Let's put it this way. Let's back up. Who is Batman in The Dark Knight meant to like represent? what are the qualities of Batman that we're supposed to identify with as Americans?
I think as Americans, and this was something I was thinking about. As I was kind of working on notes and stuff for this. Is that like we as Americans have our own obsession with rugged individualism and all that, but I think as a result of that, we are even more obsessed with like vigilantes and the actions of vigilantes. Because of that quality of rugged individualism, and I can't help but think the whole vigilante obsession is just like a major driving factor behind our culture's obsession with guns and violence
Hmm.
and stuff like that. And I think that is why, well, I should say it's the sole reason. It's one of the reasons why this character resonates with Americans. And it just so happens that he's rich, the thing that every American wants to be. So you have a rich guy with unlimited resources basically. Um who is just an extra, like we've said, an extrajudicial extension of the state.
Hmm.
And as we're going to establish here, Gotham being a microstate basically in this case. And um I think like these two things about Batman are like just the perfect, it's just it the two perfect things that resonate so well with a lot of Americans.
So and I think this is the perfect angle to take with it, because there's this scene at the start of this movie. It's where I'm pretty sure it's the first scene where Wayne is meeting Harvey Dent, right? And Dent is giving this defense of Batman, right? And I think it's and I don't actually think it's Dent that says it, but he gives this sort of like defense of the Batman, and Rachel points out that Rome, in a time of crisis, would appoint a dictator, right, to take control until the crisis was averted. And I think that this gets at the precise paradox of what you're talking about here, which is this confusion between the vigilante who is outside of the state and the dictator who is the embodiment of the state, right? And that when we conflate these two things, and I think we do in American culture and society, that we not only kind of miss the point of like Batman, but we also kind of miss that key problem with perceiving yourself the dictator as the vigilante, right? And I think that that's, yeah, I think that that's the tension
Yeah.
that you're
And
identifying there.
there's I think there is a lot to be said about the cult of Donald Trump and his base viewing him in that role basically.
Right. That's an interesting view. I think you're right, and yet, and it's completely impossible to, right, that
Yeah.
you cannot at once be outside of the state
Mhm.
and overcoming it and becoming it,
Yeah.
right?
I don't think that if we were to go round up 100, Trump supporters and take them to DC and be like, out on the Capitol steps and ask them point blank, do you think Donald Trump is a vigilante? I don't know if a lot of them, maybe they would say yes. I don't know. I don't know if a lot of them would say yes, but if you were to like give the definition of a vigilante, and like read it out and say like, do you think Donald Trump embodies these characteristics? I think they would answer yes, in that case.
From that perspective, if that's who Harvey Dent is, then the Batman becomes, the deep state, right? Or the runaway parts of the deep state that are
Yeah.
ultimately, indistinguishable from
Batman is
right.
Q.
Right. Right. And I think that and so I think that that's there too. And I think it's conspicuous, right?
Yeah.
That you kind of have with this thing with Batman and Joker, right? You have kind of an archetype for the conflict that the United States was in the process of losing, right? And with Dent, you kind of have a nod towards an actual kind of dictatorial authority, right? Or an
Mhm.
actual sort of embodiment of state power as a means of transcending the chaos and the necessary vigilante behavior as a result of it.
Yeah. It's funny, this is one of those films that I still appreciate solely for the purpose of entertainment and Ledger's acting, but I
Mhm.
can't help but find myself feeling a little gross with each rewatch as I get older.
Right. It certainly feels even more gross when you watch Dark Knight Rises and kind of see where these themes are going to ultimately culminate. You know,
Yep, yep. And that might just be something we have to review, in the near future for the sake of continuity. But
I agree. But let's get back to the Dark Knight here. Bruce Wayne, the extrajudicial extension of the state, right, meets his ultimate foil in this film, which is Ledger's Joker.
more than
I,
Bane, more
right.
than Bane.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
And I mean, and I suspect that we would have seen a reprisal of this conflict
yeah.
had Ledger been there to reprise his role. But I think the first question we have to ask here, to what extent can we understand, Joker as a genuine depiction of anarchism, right?
So I think there are hints in the film that address that question to a degree. So one of the more famous moments in the film, and sort of something I pose here to listeners, is that did Nolan accidentally do leftist anarchism in this scene? And that's when uh, Joker is in Harvey Dent's hospital room. I think this is a little
Hmm.
over halfway through the movie, and then they're preparing to officially break him and turn him into Harvey Two Face Dent. And the Joker says, "Look what I did to this city with a few drums of gas and a couple of bullets. You know what I've noticed? Nobody panics when things go according to plan, even if the plan is horrifying. So if I tell the press tomorrow that like a gangbanger will be shot or a truckload of soldiers will be blown up, nobody panics because it's all part of the plan. But when I say that one little old mayor will die, well, then everyone loses their minds." So I think that there's an element here of the Joker potentially arguing that people only truly care when like the
Hmm.
authority structures that rule over
Right.
their lives are
Right.
toppled and that pseudo comfort is torn away. So the mayor of Gotham, the head of a microstate, getting killed and sending everybody into a frenzy versus a truckload of soldiers, which are expendable tools of the state. That's the
Mhm.
dichotomy.
After 9/11, guys like Karl Rove like went to Hollywood and had like meetings about the types of movies that would be beneficial to the new American project, right? And I think it's important to recognize, or to at least, because we are kind of suggesting that this is sort of a right wing film, or at least one that's making a tacit defense of imperialism,
Yeah.
but that it's important to acknowledge the moral universe and limitations that Nolan is operating in, right? And that for its time, this does almost rise to the level of a critique, right?
Mhm.
But it has the benefit of ultimately reinforcing that what people really want the most, and as ugly as it may be, all the masses really want is to feel a stability and a security in the structures of power as they exist, right? And
Yeah.
so there, to the extent that this is kind of an indictment of the power structure, it's also a defense of it. That
Yeah.
to the extent that democracy might be seen as like a valuable or intervening force in any of these things, our portrayal here is that there's nothing but hopelessness
Mhm.
for people to actually seize a role in any of these processes, right? Because all people really want, I mean, people will like there's a lot of this sort of stuff,
Yeah.
and some of it's undercut, right? I'm thinking of the scene on the boats with the prisoners and the people, right?
Yeah.
But they're also, some lady like takes a shot at the informant or the whistleblower on the on Wayne Enterprises, like
Yeah.
as he's
Yeah.
like walking out of the Thompson Center. It's just like some like that, because at the end of the film, like Joker's like, hey, kill that guy or I'm gonna blow up a hospital, right?
Mhm.
And this guy's just getting mobbed by like the public, and
Yeah.
like some like white lady from Aurora like puts two in his chest in the Thompson Center or something like,
Right.
but but there is this portrayal of what the people are like and what the people want, and it's not at all hopeful, and I think it conspicuously to the extent that it rises to the level of critique, it also props up these things.
And secondly, I think we should note, that Christopher Nolan is probably a total fucking crypto fascist.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, I think that a filmmaker whose movies are exceptionally popular among Ayn Rand fans is unambiguously that.
yeah. Though there is a Ra's al Ghul quote from the Batman world where he says, "Create enough hunger and everyone becomes a criminal." So I don't remember if
Right.
that was in Batman Begins or that is a comic quote. I'm not totally sure, but
But it also does, once again, sort of lend this irrational stupidity to things that people want and grievances that people might have. Like it's
yeah,
they're just rumbly bellies out there. And
right,
that and
right,
which and I don't think it's untrue, but I think it's once again this sort of trope of a public that is absolutely powerless,
yeah.
in the face of these processes. So let's look at the dichotomy given to us in The Dark Knight. We have the microstate of Gotham, Batman, Bruce Wayne as an extrajudicial extension, and the flip side of the duality we're presented with is Ledger's Joker, an unstoppable force of chaos hell-bent on corrupting Batman, and effectively using that tactic to topple the Gotham government.
The question I kind of want to pose here is, can we consider the Gotham mob a part of the state in this film?
It could be viewed as the same sort of relationship we see with cartels and the Mexican government, in addition to another example like the Russian mafia and the Kremlin. The entanglement of these entities certainly could lead one to argue that these things are just extensions of each other. Organizations that wield immense power and wealth, which utilize a corrupted state to further their material goals.
So is that what the Joker might be doing in this movie? Potentially revealing the hypocrisy of these things. Is he trying to highlight this relationship and effectively destroy it?
Yeah, I think the Joker definitely has this antagonistic relationship with the mob to the same extent that they do with uh the with with Batman and with the official government, etc. But I think it goes almost a little deeper in this movie. I think that there's this like almost comedy of like Dent and Gordon like
Mhm.
not trusting each other's people, right?
Yeah,
And
right, right,
you
right.
really kind of get this sense, and I really suspect they saved a lot of money on like stand-ins and all this sort of stuff, right? But you get this sense that everybody who's like off screen, um like all of the sort of faces and people that would make the mechanizations of this movie actually work in real life, that they are also bumblingly corrupt or
Mhm.
incompetent, right?
Right.
And so
Yeah.
once again, we have this, you know, this fountainhead of characters here, around which, they're the only ones whose will can actually change any of this situation, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's what the mob is. The mob is, oh, here's what your regularly self-interested person is, right? Here's a normal person who understands the stakes. This is
Mhm.
what they're like. They're rich criminals or something. And then
Yeah.
you have these members of the zeitgeist who can actually, whose will actually matters, whose will to change and to power really can affect things, and the mob is not a part of it, right? I think that that's kind of what we're being shown here,
Mhm.
in addition to this other critique of these organizations.
Yeah. It's interesting because, like, if we want to view the mob as an extension of the Gotham sort of microstate, like the
Hmm.
Joker literally takes over the mob in the movie and then destroys it.
Yep. I mean, he
I
like
mean,
sets
it's
all the money on
he sets all the
fire,
money
and
on
yeah.
fire. Like he literally captures it. He captures
Yeah.
a what could be considered a weapon of the Gotham state and then destroys it
Yeah.
in an instant. Another thing I want to pose to you here, and I was kind of mind blown with this proposition. I saw
Hmm.
this was a comment on Reddit, and it makes the argument that all of the Dark Knight trilogy villains can be seen as allegories for how capitalists view socialists and the
Hmm.
ideology of socialism itself. And the Joker is how capitalists view anarchism.
Right.
Ra's al Ghul is okay. So he like leads this like shadowy organization of like assassins, basically.
Okay.
So that's who Bruce Wayne like. Like his parents get killed. He grows up and he's like struggling with this basically, and he like wants to like you know change himself and learn how to fight crime basically. So he goes off in the world and like leaves Gotham and like basically disappears forever. And he I can't remember how I think Ra's al Ghul finds him because he knows that like this is Bruce Wayne, like the billionaire of Wayne
Mm,
Enterprises and stuff. Like why is he in this like Asian country somewhere in like a jail cell? And so uh like Bruce Wayne, I think kind of offers like this is why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. And so Ra's al Ghul is like, we will train you to do your stuff, basically. And so that's how Batman is formed. Like
right.
Bruce Wayne gets all of the training to become Batman from I can't remember the name of the order that Ra's al Ghul is like the leader of.
Okay.
That's who Liam Neeson plays him in that film. But
But so what is
like
the avatar for, or what is represented in that villain?
so Neeson basically sees the world as like modern society. Ra's al Ghul sees the world as like this incredibly corrupted thing. Like society, is people going hungry, and as we've established, and all the stuff that's that's wrong with the world. And his idea is basically to just use the Thanos way of correcting it by just destroying everything and starting from scratch and rebuilding a just society from there. Okay, so like there are the Thanos way of doing this, obviously has its flaws, but
Right.
there are elements of radical sort of like, proletariat overthrow of like authority structures in
Mhm.
the order in which Ra's al Ghul is sort of operating. And
So we
that
have
is
cleansing destruction, a chaotic anarchism, and then Bane
Bane
is the
Bane comes
terror.
from Bane, yes, but Bane and Ra's al Ghul are I think Batman Begins and The Dark Knight Rises, the motivations and sort of like the schemes going on between Ra's al Ghul and Bane are very similar because Bane is carrying out the plans of Ra's al Ghul's daughter in The Dark Knight Rises,
Okay.
basically. So, she's kind of the shadowy puppet figure in that film, and Bane's doing all this stuff basically as the public figurehead for this movement. So
So what
like
I'm trying to the reason I'm sort of going down this line of questioning to sort of answer it is just to
yeah,
try to figure out whether or not there's anything like exclusive, whether or not we're seeing a depiction of like socialism or just kind of a depiction of anything like that might rise to the level of a critique of the order of things, right?
I don't think it's
Um
yeah. I mean, the
like cuz
more
I
when,
think
when
that
you
I think that that's how any system defends itself, right?
mhm,
I think that any system, capitalism or otherwise, is going to try to retrench itself by
yeah,
saying that everything that's an alternative is just destruction and chaos and terror,
sure,
right? And that's whether you're trying to take down anarchism or essentially anything that isn't a
mhm,
nakedly right wing ideology of order,
yeah.
that's how the defense is going to look.
So I think the better way to maybe put this then is that these villains can be seen as allegories for enemies of capitalism. Basically, is probably the better way to put it.
Right,
It's a
but
more
I think that that's mostly coincidental to that being our historical moment, right? That
yeah,
this is how systems of power portray their opponents
mhm,
is in this way as just like, as unhinged agents of chaos.
yeah. So I mean, I think The Dark Knight does an excellent job of getting people to absolutely equate anarchism with chaos. I spent a little bit of time before writing this reading on anarchism by Noam Chomsky, and just to kind of
Mhm.
just sort of reacquaint myself with the the writings of other individuals that Chomsky is focusing on in that, and it's pretty staggering getting that detailed of a view of that ideology, and then you go on the street
Right.
and ask any American what anarchism is, and they will tell you it's, it just means chaos. And 100%, 100% that is something that would happen. So, and this is just this film, whether intentionally or unintentionally, for how big it was, easily contributed to
Mhm.
further confusion for what that term
Right.
means.
Right. And I think that that's precisely what our argument here is that the Joker is a ideological caricature of anarchism, specifically, but also just any attempt to provide an alternative to capitalism broadly.
It goes back to what we were saying earlier with how much obsession we have with vigilantes, that we love them so much that we would give them mass domestic surveillance powers.
That's the thing, is that it's that I don't think that this is straight up like hand the state this type of surveillance power. Like there's a critique of mass surveillance in
Mm.
this movie, but it is the most
It's
like
so two-sided though.
conciliatory. Yes, it's the most conciliatory critique of mass surveillance.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
because it's literally like, okay, um and we'll go ahead and do explanatory comma for this. So Batman's division, right, has managed to activate like the microphones in everybody's mobile devices to create a sonar image of everything that's surrounding it within sort of a limited space or whatever. And so the effect of this technology is to basically create a 3D rendering of Gotham that is accessible and manipulatable from this computer that's housed at Wayne Enterprises, right?
And I just love how much like other noise is going on in this movie that we just sort of brush over how like fucking terrifying that notion like actually is.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, it's not, and the thing is it's not veiled at all what we're being
I
shown.
know. Yeah.
Because even in 2008, and I think that people kind of forget this because it all
Mhm.
got whistleblown and became much more clear and apparent.
Yeah.
But like
The
even in
whistleblowing,
2008,
like
yeah.
the collection of that information was going on by Edward Snowden, like probably, during the
Mhm.
making of that movie. So
But people understood that telephone companies had forked over a bunch of stuff to the NSA,
mhm.
right? Like that wasn't a secret. The extent of it, the detail of it, all of this sort of stuff was well understood while this
Yeah.
movie's being made, between 2006 and 2008, right?
Yeah.
And so we're meditating very directly here on a current event issue in this movie. And
Even more relevant today, for one
right.
thing,
That yes,
with
it's
social
only
media.
grown more relevant.
Yeah.
And what we're shown, right, is that even in this world, this sort of high Ayn Randian world of morality, that this is too far, right? But in the way that nothing in this movie can ever, actually rise to the level of critique, what we're shown is that it is unambiguously necessary to taking down the enemies of the state,
Mhm.
basically, the chaos broadly, right? But that the the fountainhead will lay down those
I
powers,
mean, think
right?
about how many times the American military has done this in history. We
Mhm.
we just had to use the nuclear bomb.
Sure,
We just had to
sure.
vaporize a bunch of
Right.
Japanese,
And we
to
are
stop them.
we're the responsible stewards of that power and technology, right? That only the, Ayn Randian protagonist, can both wield that power and put it down,
Yeah.
right? And I think that this is the sort of fiction of fascism on the right. That isn't true. I think on the left there is an understanding of like what happens when you let dictatorship into your ideology, right? That you don't go back, right? But liberals, and certainly the right, kind of have this view that like we can like fork over these powers, and then um Morgan Freeman will blow them up when he's done using them, right? And that's what we're shown in this movie, is that it's like, Lucius, when he discovers the machine at Wayne Enterprises, is like, I fucking quit. And Bruce Wayne's like, all right, fine, but make this your last job, and then type your name in, and the machine will blow up, and it'll all go away, because that's how technology works, right? It's that you once you the knowledge exists to build something and you build it, if you blow that thing up, you can never build it again. That's just gone. You just that's how technology works. But I mean, it's really lucky nobody blew up the first car or anything, because otherwise we
Right.
wouldn't have
Yeah.
or
Right.
the first airplane. What would have happened if the Wright brothers would have crashed that, and then nobody
Yeah.
was ever able to invent an airplane ever again?
Right.
Anyway, but that's yeah. So I think that we're shown here a movie that is just absolutely replete with um like this was something that could be the best movie for anyone, right? If
Mhm.
you were somebody who was critical of the war on terror and the American state and even capitalism, I think in 2008 you could have watched this movie and been like, yeah, that's how the world is. Just as well as you could have sat on the right side of the aisle and said, yeah, that's what the world is. And that's the genius of Nolan's film, is that he none of the critiques go all the way, and
Yeah.
everybody who showed up could take something personal away from what they saw
Mhm.
there.
Yeah. Yeah. The more that I don't know, like addressing the component of mass domestic surveillance at the end of the film, there has to be at least some sort of like equation between or equating between like the American military using all means necessary to, eradicate the enemy in the name of imperialism, compared to what happened in the film there. So
Mhm.
that's yeah.
Right, and that great men can save us, right? And that to me is the sort of is the right wing and Hegelian part of this, right? Is that, as fucked up as it is, there will be a room of men, and I mean it is
Right.
conspicuously a room of men, even in 2008 in this movie,
Yeah.
that have the will to save us, right? and
Mhm.
and that's and I think that, yeah, when you watch this, you really can spot Christopher Nolan's politics.
Yeah. 100%. It's just funny because like I especially over the past 2 years. I mean, I think if I were to have watched this film in college, I wouldn't have picked it up, but it's, now it's still one of my favorite films, 100%, and I think it always will be, but that it can still be one of my favorite films, and I can still, like, look at it through a much more critical lens as I get older, and still have it be something that I enjoy to watch.
I
So,
like it more now that I realize that it's such a kind of complex and repulsive window into that moment, and even
yeah,
even still, and I think it's still deeply relevant,
yeah,
15 years later or whatever. But
yeah,
that I actually appreciate this movie a lot more now
mhm,
that I can kind of appreciate the ideology that's woven into it in a way that I didn't, and that certainly very few did in
mhm,
2008.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I would have liked to have believed the Joker Ledger's Joker is some kind of ideological anarchist, but he's not, and that's it. It his character is just the embodiment of chaos that has these themes sort of playing a little bit throughout the film, but like you said, it never ever reaches that full critique. It just doesn't.
Hmm. Hmm.
So,
Well, yeah, and because
and
for us
Hollywood's never
to
going to do that.
actually,
So,
right, to actually
yeah.
portray a sympathetic Joker, right,
Mhm.
which we know has we've done that movie now.
Yeah,
But in 2008, you know, with the images of the towers still fresh in our mind, was not that
yeah.
wasn't like doable. In fact, one of the things that I noticed, and part of it was just being in the mindset that
Mhm,
we've been in on this show for the last little bit, um, was that the opening shot of this movie is the camera approaching at speed to the side of a glass box skyscraper, and right as it's about to get to the point of impact on the pane, um, something shoots out of the building,
yeah.
right, through the glass, and it's just this
Ooh,
right. It's just that
very
there's sort of
interesting.
this thing that the mind does where you know, if you're kind of in that space, which so many were in 2008, like it was really in the psychic energy of it that
Yeah.
that which you realize what you're seeing is still downstream of that, right? But that it's trying to rattle people a lot more than anything would have been. Like this movie in 2003, right, is not as gritty or complex
Mhm,
as it is in 2008. And you certainly don't
yeah.
start it out with the camera going at speed towards a glass box skyscraper and the window being broken.
Imagine the fucking Joker movie from 2019 being released in
Yeah.
2003.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
And I think that
imagine that,
yeah, and
which
I
is
think that that's the
even
truth.
more dark and
Yeah.
disturbing
But
than
and
this.
that's what I'm saying is you could not have portrayed the
Yeah.
chaos that way in 2008,
Mm.
right? It was too
I don't
close.
even think I don't even right, exactly. I don't even think, yeah, that our most recent Joker film, could have even have been around at the time of The Dark Knight. So,
Yeah.
and I just wanna say too that, like, that film by Todd Phillips, um, I just said a little bit ago, like, I don't think Hollywood would have gone there. Like, that assertion is incorrect in the case of Todd Phillips's Joker with Joaquin Phoenix. In the case of The Dark Knight, the ambiguity and mystery of Ledger's Joker and his origins is the point. Like, Nolan, that's the whole
Yeah,
point, is that Nolan intentionally does not tell you his origin story.
right.
That is
Because that would make him
entirely
sympathetic.
right. That is exactly, exactly, and that is entirely, left to the imagination of the viewer. And so,
In fact, he has
um,
the Joker make up
yeah,
origin stories so
right.
the audience sees just how completely unreliable anything that this character could ever even tell you about their past would be.
Yeah. Um, which, like, is a testament to, like, Nolan's writing, basically. And that's, we offered our criticism of him, in this episode, but, like, this is something that he does very well.
But it is still meant to
Solely as a
delegitimize, but it does still delegitimize any, because like because you know, the first time you hear that story where Joker's like, you know, talks about his dad, you know, slicing his face open or whatever, that's horrifying. It builds sympathy. But then you see him in a later scene tell a completely different, you know,
yeah,
self-serving version of that story.
yeah.
And so I think that it it's good, right? Like it's thrilling to sort of see it happen, right? But it does actively undermine any defense that might or sympathy that one might raise for the Joker,
Mhm.
even within providing the most sympathetic moments for the Joker.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
undercutting
mhm,
his legitimacy and status as a sympathetic
yeah.
character.
It's interesting. I think, like, I could be totally wrong in saying this, but sort of how I viewed Phoenix's Joker in the 2019 film is that, like, his origin story could potentially be viewed as an origin story for, like, Ledger's Joker, because there are those themes, like, there is continuity between those themes between The Dark Knight
Yeah,
and what is probably explored way more in depth in Joker, basically. And
sure.
so, um yeah, I mean, yeah, like, if we were to ever get a full movie with Phoenix's Joker, yeah, it's going to be much different, most likely. But I think that the I think a full film with Phoenix as Joker, like, that Joker offering his criticisms of the system is probably going to be a lot more hard hitting than what you would
Sure.
see, with Ledger's Joker. So,
Sure, and I'm glad we
yeah,
were able to kind of highlight because because like this movie did seem like the realest, like grittiest depiction of the world, right?
Yeah.
When it came out, like it was hard to imagine that you could have like
Mhm.
taken it like
Yeah.
to something else. And now you kind of watch it and you do realize how sort of manicured the stakes are and the and all the rest of it. And I don't think
Yeah.
it's because filmmaking has gotten grittier, but almost because we've like there's one scene in this where it's like almost comedy or something where it's like Wayne is like coming in to have like a conversation with Gordon or something, and it's literally just like Gary Oldman's head just like floating in a dark room, like for no apparent reason.
Yeah.
Like there's not
Yeah.
really a clear reason why it's so dark in this room. It just
Mhm.
is, and
Yeah.
that's the whole movie. That's the whole
Yeah.
movie. And I think in 2008, like that's really all you had to do to really convince people that like serious gritty shit was going on, which was just
Mhm.
turn the lights off.
Yeah. So, like, just from the like, from a superficial level, like, my favorite and still, like, it was when I was a kid and still to this day, like, my favorite, like, sequence of events in this film is the Joker intentionally getting fucking captured and, like, letting Batman beat the shit out of him to ultimately reveal, like, this, like, insane ultimatum of pick Dent or your lover, and,
Right.
that
Right.
is just yeah, that's the best part of the film for me, is when he basically gives that to him, and, like, Batman with all of his strength and all of that is, you think he's in control because he's beating the shit out of the Joker, but the Joker is, in full control the entire time.
What
Well,
do we make as viewers in 2021? What do we make of the boat scene?
I think oh god, I don't know.
Can
I
I
don't
hold
even
on
know
a
how to
second? As a Chicagoan, the idea of needing boats and tunnels to get out of the city is like I couldn't suspend my disbelief that far.
Right.
I was like, what are they doing? This doesn't make any sense. Why aren't they just on the Eisenhower?
Yeah.
Anyway. But what do we make of that? Why in this movie we're shown and I mean maybe it is just like the only vestige of defense that Nolan can manage for normal people, right? That it's like but I think it's the most unrealistic portrayal of human nature like in the whole
Oh,
thing.
I think people would have
Yeah.
100% have blown each other up.
Yeah.
Easily. People are fucking crazy,
Yeah. There's no way. I mean like
especially
it's
now. Nowadays.
I mean, for me, it's just a question. The only question is like the academic question of who would have turned the key first.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I suspect that the answer is that the civilians would have turned the key first because they would have been more likely to have had a say over
Mhm.
what happened to it. Whereas I suspect the people in charge of the detonator on the prison ship probably would have like I don't know done something uh to keep that control away from the the prison population. But we're shown this we're shown the prison like the person who breaks right the person who splits the Gordian knot who breaks the prisoner's dilemma is one of the prisoners right
Yeah.
who throws the detonator out the window
Mhm.
and that's and like I don't know. It's like I almost think that like it almost seems like something that was put in post or something, or it was the studio saw it and was like, "Hey, we got to have some redeeming aspect of human nature in this movie." Like
Yeah.
because honestly, it doesn't serve like a plot function. You know what I'm saying? Like you could cut that from the movie, and it wouldn't I mean, I guess it exists to explain why nobody can go save both Rachel and Harvey Dent,
I think it's
right?
like
Like,
an
why it has
icing
to be the Batman
that,
to
like,
go
scene
there.
was just, like, icing on top for, like, the Joker because the Joker won the film in that he broke Harvey Dent because that was the sole
Yeah,
purpose, basically, of what he was trying to do, was get Batman to break his rule, break Harvey Dent, and he accomplished that. He did, 100%,
right,
and him getting a boat to, kill another boat would've it's just icing,
right.
for him, basically. So,
But it almost yeah, and I mean, maybe it was in the original whatever, but, like, if it had been suggested by the
I think it's a fair
studio,
point you're
like
bringing up, yeah.
and I think the fact that it doesn't necessarily have to be in there. Like, you could come up with other circumstances. right?
Yeah.
For the things that are mechanically happening in the plot at that point. And
Yeah.
it does kind of seem to be in there as like a oddly enough, as like a bit of like sunlight for human nature in this Ayn Randian film here. This is an independently produced podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at COINTELPROPod and support more of our work on our Patreon page. The link is in the show notes and in our Twitter bio. We'll see you next week on COINTELPRO.